Hello, everybody. I'm just going to check. Can you hear me? Oh, that's a big one. I can't tell if you don't hear me. Kia ora, Christina. Can I get some from everyone if you can hear me? As you can see, unfortunately today I am for various reasons I'm alone and presenting to you just by myself. Okay, you can hear me. Beautiful, Christina. Okay. Tēnā koutou, tēnā koutou, tēnā koutou katoa, ko te kolman toko e. Kia ora, everyone. We'll begin with karakia, and then I'll just outline how the session is going to go. Kia hora te marino, kia whakapapa puna mo te moana. He urahi mā tātou e te rangi nei. Araha atu, araha mai. Tātou e tātou katoa. Haui e, tāki e. Right. All right. Well, thank you everyone who has taken time, I know, out of their non-contact to join us for today's webinar around learning languages. As you can see, I am alone today for the first time for the webinars. Just various things conspired against us, but that is okay. We're still going to follow the similar format, and I've still drawn upon learning language expertise in creating the materials and resourcing. So I will say that if any of you that are in the group now want to chime in later on, I will offer an opportunity for that, and I can invite you in, and if you have something that you would particularly like to share from what you've looked at in terms of the learning languages curriculum, then that opportunity will be given. So what we're going to do, as ever, is I will show you the main resource, and then I will take you through our snapshot summary on the learning languages. And I'm going to read quite a lot, obviously, because I'm drawing on material that's been provided to me. As you know, I'm not a learning languages expert. So thank you everyone who is here, and we'll get started. All right, let me find the right screen. Okay. All right, so as ever, I have created a page, a web source for you to go to take you through the consultation program. And there are various bits in there, and I'll show you a bit more about that when I've gone through the summary, just in terms of how you get to accessing the material on Taharangi and the consultation document. Learning languages is organised a little bit differently, so we might spend a bit of time just looking at that because it's a bit trickier to find. And we'll now look at the snapshot document. And as I said, these materials, which are designed, it is all designed to be sort of a quick whisk through the curriculum area to get people interested and get people aware of what's going on in terms of the curriculum, get them encouraged to do the consultation. We only have 9 days left for completing the consultation, so please, if you are keen, get stuck in and get that completed, and encourage your colleagues and others to do so as well. All right, so looking at the learning languages draft, it is a bit of a trickier one because there are obviously different materials for different languages, and the way that it's been organised on Taharangi, when we go and have a look at that, you'll see the sort of a sort of broad statement, and then it splits off into particular languages. But as I said, these are kind of the broad big picture issues that have been raised to me. So centrally, the concern is that this curriculum that's currently framed is a step backwards for language education in Aotearoa, and that there are three main structural problems that are overshadowing kind of everything in terms of this. The reduction of the teaching time and some levels, not allowing for meaningful language acquisition, for developing fluency, that kind of consistent practice that any of us who have attempted to try and learn a language will know is required. The removal of the communication strand, which you would think is crucial, really. And then, as ever, the optional status of the learning area. And these are kind of the big issues that are glaring for the learning languages community. And you know, and for them, really everything kind of falls out of that. So if we look at the purpose statement that's been given, again, the purpose statement's meant to articulate, you know, sort of the value of the learning area, but that is tricky with languages because it's not compulsory. So why is this, you know, the purpose statement that should be setting a tone for why something is value and why it is important for all learners is a bit tricky to write if you're actually then saying, but we won't make, it's not compulsory for all learners. So schools can opt out of offering learning languages entirely, and therefore this kind of purpose statement becomes really a bit more of an aspirational rather than a distinct purpose to it. So the big one, again, that I mentioned earlier was that lacking of reference to the communication strand. So it mentions communication and transactional communication, but that, and that's a good thing, but that emphasis is not then reflected across the other two knowledge strands, linguistic knowledge and culture and socio-linguistic knowledge, that kind of come underneath that. So again, the communication strand is gone, and then where it is mentioned, it's not embedded. And, really communication is the central purpose of language, learning languages, and really should have that strand to match. Some of the concern around, language pedagogies. So there's a concern that it's sort of going back very much to kind of collecting a lot of vocab, collecting a lot of grammatical structures, but actually the more modern notions of how we think about language in terms of the cultural understandings is absent. And, that purpose there around, interlocking types of knowledge, vocabulary, sound systems, grammar are all great. Those things are organized to some extent in terms of a knowledge progression, but sort of how they all actually interweave and work together is not clear at all. It sort of the document is listing a lot of things to teach in terms of instruction to teachers, but not really a sense of why the students should be learning these things, the purpose to them, and then providing actual genuine learning objectives. So what should be success criteria for the learners and for the teachers to be able to guide them in the direction that they're going. In terms of the structure, again, this communication strand is the big issue. So removing that, reduces the language learning to really a list of isolated vocabulary, grammatical structures, and cultural facts, but not really indicating how these are brought together and how these are really used in terms of communication, in terms of that solid purpose. The breadth over the depth. So there's lots of content, lots of kind of lots of quantity of stuff, but not really a connection point to whether or not they're developing that communicative competency. And just, and sort of the why, the purposefulness of it too. It's very content heavy, but in terms of the rhetoric around knowledge rich, that's not felt. One example of that is, in the novice statement that they make, the students at the beginning are supposed to know a non-breaking space is required before question marks and exclamation marks in French, which is a typographical fact, but it doesn't really enhance their ability to communicate more effectively in that language. And it's sort of a thing at particularly at novice one level. Really, it's about trying to start developing those communication things as opposed to knowing lots of bits. The knowledge strands, there's a feeling that they're not coherently presented to support coherent planning. So, there's not as much guidance around the kind of scope and the scaffolding that is required. And this is the lack of distinct learning objectives makes that really tricky in terms of what should the students be able to do as a result of learning in languages. The introduction. So again, there are several things here that were highlighted. The idea that it doesn't really capture what language looks like in practice. It doesn't describe the kind of communicative and immersive and culturally situated nature of effective language programming. So there's no acknowledgement of the role of meaningful interactions, inputs, outputs in language acquisition, things that are talked about by the ministry's own guidance around effective pedagogy. The loss of student voice. So, where is the student? The draft doesn't talk about the students' cultural backgrounds, their lived experiences, their linguistic identity, what they're bringing to language, which is in quite contrast to current and best practice. The authentic language learning environment. So there's not a sort of, it talks about that in the introduction, but that notion is not carried through in the later phases. And because of the quantity of content that's been prescribed here to be covered, it's going to make it tricky in terms of how teachers will design authentic learning experiences given the short time frame and the quantity of stuff to do. So how is that notion of authenticity really carrying through? Intercultural competence. I think this is really interesting as a person that's not a language teacher, but that idea around, language learning carries that notion of intercultural competence, our global citizenship, our ability to develop empathy and understandings across cultures and across nations. And that sort of cultural dimension of the draft is really lacking. And it kind of presents languages as quite static chunks of knowledge rather than that, language is an evolving and culturally situated phenomena, and it is a dynamic thing. And that's interesting too. I think not only about global citizenship, but also in terms of the different languages that we have here in Aotearoa, New Zealand, and the context that we have here. There's a concern that the phases and the emphasis of the phases are not clear either, in terms of articulating the different emphasis we should have according to different phases of our language learning. So in the beginning, language learning should be playful and exploratory and really, a lot of oral communication and cultural experience. And later on, it's going to move into that linguistic knowledge and communicative fluency. At the moment, that progression is not visible. All right, moving to the phase teaching sequences. Phase 1. Phase 1 is our foundational phase. Oh, I'm missing a capital letter. I see in there. And so that's, again, where it's really the absence of the communication strand is really notable, because we should have the young learners introduced to language through songs and games and meaningful interactions and things that will build their phonological awareness and their basic vocabulary and that positive kind of disposition towards language learning, keeping it joyful and interesting and building that curiosity, and giving them a sense too of the kind of cultural knowledge of the language as well. That's part of that it's not this kind of just isolated thing, that actually the language is located and situated, and having authentic materials and stories to provide to that. In phase 2, there's an idea that there's a lot of focus on isolated lists, vocab, grammar, structure, etc., but not really bringing that together as to what is the purpose of that? What can we do with that language? What will it allow the learners to be able to do? And again, connecting back to, I guess, what should have been developed in terms of their interest in communicating. The sequencing is also quite narrow in terms of that. There's a clear structure in terms of piecing together vocabulary and grammar, but not necessarily a clear sense of how they communicate meaningfully in that language. We get to phase 3, there's really that issue around time. So at years 7 to 10, it talks about 30 minutes to an hour and a half a week. It's not really giving the time over to make the content, to engage with that content meaningfully. So, the language learning needs consistency. It needs high frequency exposure. It needs practice over time. There are also some factual inaccuracies in some of the material in the French curriculum, in the Spanish curriculum, I believe as well, where some of the content is actually inaccurate and wrong. There's also concern around terminology across the document, inconsistency around the terminology, which also is potentially going to confuse teachers. In phase 4, the allocation time again, 60 hours per year in years 9 and 10, about an hour and a half a week. Again, not sufficient for meaningful language development at this level. And you're hoping at this point students are getting really into some genuine fluency in their communications. They're engaging with texts, written texts in the language, and really starting to develop skills they're going to need to take them forward into phase 5 and potentially into NCEA. And there's a concern here that they're not going to have that clear pathway because they won't have done enough scaffolding into that. So what does that do? What will the impact be for them at phase 5 and potentially in terms of ongoing and further language study into the university through the NCA? So across the phase summary, again, the notion that communication strands is missing. It's sort of lists of stuff, but the sort of why, the weaving together is absent. The notion that this learning area remains optional. What does that signal to our schools and to students and to whānau? And how will that impact on equities for those who don't have access to language learning outside of schools? And also students for whom, this might be part of their home language, and this is a place at school that they can further develop knowledge of their own home language and their own cultural identities. And, and this opportunity is now being taken. So that purpose, that authenticity, that identity background. The Pacifica languages seem to be particularly lacking in terms of the attention that they're given, which seems strange given our position in the Pacific and the high number of Pacific students that we have in our schools. The lack of time, talked specifically about that in phase 3 and 4, and then some errors and inconsistent terminologies, which, if we're going to have a long list of grammar and vocabulary, you would hope that they were in fact accurate. So the overall comments around this is thinking about language as foundational, connecting Aotearoa New Zealand to the world, thinking about how it enables us to build our intercultural understanding of others, our empathy for others. And there are many benefits to learning languages we know in terms of cognitive, social, and cultural, and having it in this kind of optional space with insufficient time is sending potentially a very worrying signal about New Zealand's position in terms of those things and our own kind of learners' ability in terms of the global competencies. It's quite a narrowed focus. This is concerned that language learning is sort of been reduced to learning lists out of a book. It does feel like a significant step backwards for language education in Aotearoa, where gains had been made. Those 3 core structural issues, the optional status of it, the loss of communication and the time. And as I said, just that notion, I think the last one really important around inequity and the consequences of that. So language learning is going to be enriching for all students, and because of its optional positioning, because of the way it's framed, the time, the resourcing that doesn't seem to have been factored into this development, there's a real concern that it's only students who can access external tutoring or will have the opportunity to travel overseas or do have heritage languages or other languages in the home that will be able to access and engage with the benefits of language learning. Okay, I'm going to stop that. And I am going to move now to the main document, which, hang on, lost my thread now. My apologies, gang. There we go. All right, so this is the main page as ever, and this will give you some connections to how to engage with this consultation. The document I've just walked through is here, the snapshot again. Here, this button will take you to the learning area. As I said, this is a little bit fiddlier than some of the other curriculum learning areas. You'll have to scoot down to get into all the different sections for the different languages. So if you are specifically interested in a particular language, make sure you go down here. As you can see, it's interesting to note the positionality of te reo and sign language. Obviously, it's still official languages of Aotearoa New Zealand. And then there's the novice 1 page 2 that you can look at here. This one here is kind of the overview for learning languages, and then it goes into the different parts of the language. So it is a bit fiddlier to move around. Again, the feedback form is there, and you can link to that. So, now what I've done. Oh, goodness. Hang on a moment, guys. I moved out of that, and I should not have done. That's all right. I'll go back. As I said, it's a bit fiddlier. I've proved that, haven't I, by getting lost. It's a bit fiddlier to navigate the Taharangi page around learning languages because they've split it into the different languages themselves. And then I go back to my screen. Yes. All right. Then this button here will take you, no, that's not it. This button here will take you to the consultation survey document. We've gone through that again. Again, they're asking for exactly the same survey data that they're asking of the other learning areas. And I've popped down here a couple of extra bits of reading. This will take you to an Ipu Kereru link, article written by Florence Lyons regarding the curriculum draft. And this one here is a wealth of material around the notion of learning languages as making that a compulsory area of the New Zealand curriculum. So that should give you all the materials that you need to have a little look at that. I will now we are finished early because it was just me talking. And I'm wondering if anyone has comments or anyone would like to chip in and share their thoughts. Let me go back to my screen so I can see if anybody wants to say anything. Please pop a comment into the chat if that is you. I'll give you a moment. Feel the pressure. Or, of course, you can just put a comment into the live chat as well. Mine's frozen, so I hope that's not indicative of what's going on for everybody else. Oh, thank you. Thank you, Ian. I appreciate your comment. I appreciate your support. Okay. If nobody does want to chime in, I totally appreciate that. That's fine. You might want your the rest of your Wednesday afternoon back. As ever, this will all go up onto the AEC site very shortly, and then it will all go onto the bigger web page as well. Thank you, Adele. That's great to know. So Adele Scott just commenting there, PBTA has got a page with some suggestion questions as well. So people who are looking at the consultation, I might find that and pop that on my website as well. Which maybe I'll just post again for everyone. So if you've not looked at this yet, if you're new, or you would like to join in and contribute to the consultation on this learning area or any of the learning areas or all of the learning areas, I'll just pop this again back in the chat for you. And remind you that tomorrow we will be doing the social sciences as well. So I've got a couple of colleagues who will be joining us for social sciences. And Adele, yes, I will pop your link into that order page up here as well before I post this. So I will just close out again with karakia. Thank you everybody for joining me. Kia tau tō rangimari e, kia runga i ngā iwi o te ao. Ka kite everybody, and thank you so much. Kia ora. Toodles. Thanks, Adele.